understand your brand. So the primary reason why I've actually chosen to talk about this is because of the complexities that are usually associated with branding. Now, a lot of times, there are misconceptions about branding, and it's a common term used in business, and it's a term most people are familiar with. But there are so many confusions and there are so many complexities surrounding it, and in which today I'll try as much as I can see how I can actually break this down so that you understand it better and have a better grasp of how a brand functions and how brand operates. And I'm also from time to time get your feedback, so you can get a response. I'm sure I'm actually will be with everybody the same place. So welcome once again to Launch and Learn. My name is David Woruka, and this is Futuresoft Launch and Learn. We have this twice every month, the second Monday and the last Monday of every first. Because I think this is the first Monday, but sometimes the second Monday of every month. We have it twice every month basically, and the Mondays by 12 minutes. So thank you for joining. So let's get into it. So one of the things we're going to be looking at first is clearing some of the basics, all the misconceptions of branding. So I'll tag that first things first. And then we're going to be looking at the concept of the brand iceberg. Then we're going to be looking at the 4 phases of the brand building process, which talks about the brand research, brainstorming or ideation process. Then we talk about the design and implementation. Then afterwards, dive into the final phase, which has to do with brand management. So let's start with this quote from an American entrepreneur, Gansky, which says, "The brand is a voice, and a product is a souvenir." Now, there's something that's key about this quote, which is why we're going to be breaking down a lot of pieces today. So she made this quote some time back: "A brand is a voice, and a product is a souvenir." And you get to understand what the difference between a brand and a product is as we dive more into the presentation. So let's get started on some basics. Now, a lot of times people confuse a logo for a brand, but it's important to understand that your logo is not your brand. Your brand is beyond your logo. And now I've placed 3 logos on the right, in which you're familiar with these logos. Most people are familiar with these logos. We have the Apple logo, we have the Coca-Cola logo, and we have the Nike logo. These are logos that are very common with so many people. But why you really need to understand that this is basically not your brand is because if these were not as popular as they were, you may not be able to recognize them and identify them just by seeing them alone. So at the end of the day, and for that of Coca-Cola, even if we don't have the Coca-Cola written on it, if we just have that, that stripe beneath it with red, a lot of people are going to associate it as well with Coca-Cola. So that even gives you an insight to make you understand that your logo alone is not just a brand, because if you see a red circle and you see that twisted right white strip over it, then your mind immediately starts going into, oh, this might be Coca-Cola, even if you may not be 100% sure. For some people, they will just assume, they will just immediately associate it with Coca-Cola, and that's because that's something, an element that is associated with the Coca-Cola brand in general. But the logo itself, it's not a brand. It's a key part of the brand. It's an essential part of the brand. It's an important part of the brand. But the logo alone is not a brand. And I will do a brief explanation as to why I'm talking about this. Now, this is a statue which some persons might be familiar with this, or seeing this independently, they may not be familiar with this. But given what I'm pointing out, some persons in their mind are already having an idea where I'm headed to. But if you walk into an office, and you see this displayed on someone's desk, your first assumption would be maybe this is some sort of award or some sort of recognition. But for those of us that are already beginning to spot the trick I'm about to play, you understand that this icon is actually associated with the brand, and it's more or less like, I wouldn't say necessarily the brand's logo, but it's a mascot that is highly associated with the brand, and it's a brand most of us If you're not, if by looking at this image, you're not already figuring out what it is, the next image I'm going to show you, make it very clear. So this is a mascot that is usually associated with Rolls Royce. You have the Rolls Royce logo separately, yet you have this mascot which is associated with it. So this still goes on to make you understand that your brand is not just about the logo. Because for Rolls Royce, they have their logos, they have, you can see clearly here, they have the double arrows and they have the name Rolls Royce written there. That's basically the Rolls Royce logo. But for the cars itself, this icon, the spirit of ecstasy, is usually placed on it. The mascot is usually placed on it. As opposed to Mercedes Benz, where the mascot or the symbol they use, and most other car companies they use, I think Mercedes Benz actually has the style where they have the mascot or their logo above, the front panel of their cars. But in their own case, they actually use their logo. But for Rolls Royce, they decided to use this mascot and they have their logo separately. So you could see two symbols representing a particular brand, one associated closely with the product, and one generally represents the brand. But a lot of times, most people, once they see the spirit of ecstasy, this icon, they associate it with the Rolls Royce brand, but it's not basically the Rolls Royce logo. It's just the mascot that has been greatly associated with the logo, and it's been used over the years, and it's still being used, even I think in their recent productions. So it's important I clear that there for you to understand that there's a discrepancy between the logo and the brand. So then, a lot of times, so people would talk about your visual identity, the other elements associated with the design, and they often confuse that as well to mean that this is also a brand or just because it's broader, and especially for those who are more design inclined, they always give you that perception when they start talking about brand identity, then they feel they're talking about the entire brand. But like I've stated here, it's just the tip of the iceberg of your brand. It's a key part too of your brand. But that is not all your brand is about. And one other thing again is going to be your business as well. It's not also your brand. Your business is your organization. It sells your product. It offers your services. That's your business. But that is not your brand. And then it's beginning to get confusing and it's beginning to get boring and crazy because the question now then is, what then is a brand? Okay, which I'm going to take my time and explain this because I think this is like primarily what forms the basis of our conversation today. Now, a brand is the image or perception in business projects. And I know this might be complex, but I'm going to explain it. And on the subtitle, you see that I've also explained that it's the perception and feeling a customer has about a business. Now, how do I bring this more into light? You look at the image to the right, you have an apple in front of a mirror, and it's reflecting an apple, it's reflecting a pear in the mirror rather than the apple. And in this case, it's sad where it's reflecting a rotten pear. It's not reflecting even a ripe pear. Now, the problem with this is what really happens in business. In most situations, you find where this is the business, and this is what people see about the business. So this business might be healthy, they have good product, they have good services, they have standard stuff they are putting out, they have even good cultures and good experiences when you actually get in touch or in contact with the brand. But for the most part of it, this is what they reflect. They might have certain values, but they are not conveying it enough. They are not understanding how well it should be enshrined into the entirety of their communication or their experiences. And this is the situation where most companies find themselves, where they are something else, but they project something completely and entirely different. So basically, your brand is not just you having a nice packaging. Your brand is not just you having good products or good service. But what do the users feel about your product, your service? When they encounter your product, when they experience your service, what do they really feel? What perception do they have? I was in a meeting a few weeks back where someone was giving an analysis that there is a particular local airline, and he refused to mention them, that they have good ads, they have good promotions, but they never keep the time. And that at the end of the day, it's a common knowledge amongst people who patronize that particular service, they understand that these people never keep the time, and that's a poor reflection, because no matter how much they are putting into their communication, no matter how much they are putting into making their business look good, there are areas in which they are failing as well to actually compensate for. Which will bring me to the next part, which I'll state more in details. The brand has to be built on truth as well. So it's not just about projecting an image. It's not just about projecting an image, whether a false image of yourself or the actual image of yourself. It's really about projecting an image that is a true reflection of the values you embody. It's sending a perception, it's sending a feeling that is a true reflection of the values you hold. So a way I would want to explain this is, imagine two persons who offer financial services. Let's say you have two cashiers in a bank. You walk into a bank and you have two cashiers. You have one that is maybe roughly dressed, his style is offline, it's not properly fixed. They don't have proper makeups, they don't have their face properly shaped. That maybe his beards are just all over. And maybe by the time you're talking to this person, maybe you even get possible stench from the words that comes out from their mouth. They are not well spoken, they're very slow, and they're not properly dressed. And yet you see the next person sitting beside them. They are looking very clean, looking very proper, and they are more eloquent, more effective, and more fluent. This gives you an idea of they're offering same services, they're all cashiers in the bank. At the end of the day, they are they are projecting different perceptions to you as the customer. And in which, if you experience both persons, the feeling you get ultimately, whether your services were offered, whether the other person wasn't looking proper, was more detailed in terms of handling your finances, and why the other person has errors, you may not even focus on that for a long time, because the ultimate feeling, the ultimate response, maybe this person was so very warm, they were so very understanding, they tried to find out more about you, even if there were errors and the other person was more meticulous, or they've not represented themselves very well, they've not projected themselves very well. It is the perception, the impression they leave on you that lasts longer. And when we relate with people as well, this is the same thing. The impression we make on people is what they think about us. No matter how good we are in anything we do, even if we have the best of personalities, if we can't project that personality where people can actually see it and feel it, then we're not projecting the actual image of ourselves. And a lot of times we fall short, both especially as businesses, to project the right image about what we do. I sell peanuts, I sell cashews, I sell this, or I offer transportation services. But we don't project the values, the excellence, we don't create an impression on the heart of our users a lot of times. And sometimes, in Nigeria, businesses, they lose customers as a result of this, but they wouldn't know. They wouldn't know, because for some cases, we don't have that competitive market yet, but we're already getting there. And that's why the issue of branding is becoming more of, is more commonly seen or talked about right now in Nigeria. But in environments where there are competitions, you find out that they pay more attention to this, and they don't joke they don't joke about their branding, they don't joke about the impression they leave on the customers. So what I'm trying to really sum up here is this: no matter how incredible your business is, no matter how incredible your product is, no matter how incredible your service is, no matter the problem you're solving, the most important thing is, when it comes to branding, I'm not going to say like that's the most important thing in general, but it's important to actually send an impression that matches the value in which you're offering the people. Because offering a value is not just important alone, but the impression as well we create on the user, the impression you create on the customers when they get in contact with you, that matters a lot, and that's what branding is. Now, I will show some images, and then I will just give a visual explanation so that it sinks in a bit more. But then I want to make a funny analysis in which I saw once, where someone placed the images of two lighters next to each other, and then they are basically the same. One was just a regular lighter, and they placed the tag price in it, and they said $1. $1, and then there was the one next to it with an Apple logo, and it was placed at $1,000. And basically, that's what branding is. Now, the truth is, you know, an average company, I cannot put a logo on a lighter, or I can't do stuff. If let's say I have a business right now where I am, I don't have the recognition yet. I can't do that. Like I can't, that such kind of name cannot be used for a brand that has not been recognized. But the message we're really trying to send in that particular meme, it was funny, but it just shows that whatever Apple as a company associates itself automatically has value, even if it's the same quality or it's the same value any other service, any other company offers. Immediately they put their hands on that, it turns to gold. And it doesn't turn to gold because Apple is authoritative or they clamp down on people. It turns to gold because they've built an impression over time on the users where it becomes gold because of experiences over time. The impression people have had about Apple. An analysis showed recently that with the lack of innovations in their recent releases of iPhones, that the brand has survived for maybe like the past 4 or 5 years solely on the brand. It's not survived like most of the advancement Apple has actually had in terms of innovation. They've really slacked a lot. And primarily what has actually sustained them for a period of time right now is basically the brand. And that shows you the power and the influence, creating an important or a good impression on your users have. So I wanted to take my time to actually do a lot of explanation on this so you understand the difference between the product, the difference between the service, and the difference between your brand. So the summary of this is the brand is the impression. It's the impression. It's not the quality of the product. It's not the quality of the service. It is the impression. The impression the user has when they get in contact with your business, either your service or your product, when they experience it, the impression they are left with. That's what your brand really is. And that's why you have to be sure you get it right. Because once you miss it, then it's downhill from there. So I will do a brief illustration to further buttress this point. Now, this is a situation where we have a cupcake. We have a cupcake that is depicted here. And technically, this cupcake is basically saying, I'm a cupcake. You can buy, you can afford me. It's a simple cupcake. There isn't much in it. It's just straightforward. The image looks blank. And then you have this, which is a little bit more decorated. This is basically saying, as compared to this, you could clearly see this has a bit of attractiveness and a bit of feel to it. Now, in terms of quality, this could actually be one more poor than the other. But like I was saying, a brand has to be built on truth. So if you're going to present your product very well, if you're going to put a nice image of your product on your website, on social media, then that means you also, if you're talking the talk, you should be able to walk the walk as well. So if people get a cupcake, it has to be value. So, but when compared to this, you see this is basically bland and simple. And then when compared to this has a bit more of representation in terms of the imagery. So if you post this on a website and you post this on a website, this is definitely going to have a bit more attraction if one just encounters both images and where they have to click to make a purchase. This is definitely going to be the first go-to for most people. And then you have this, which is far more presented and far more decorated, and the image is actually far more better than the two other experiences we've seen. You can just take a good look again in terms of the image quality. You see a simple image, have to blur cupcakes behind of it, and you see this with a blurring image. But this is sending a message. Oh, it's more or less like a dining setting. You could see another image far behind. The lighting is better and it's far more represented very well. Now, this is not a situation where you're talking about logo. There's no logo here. There's no design. There's no icons. This is basically just images. And this is part of the reason why I'm saying your visual identity is not entirely your brand, and your logo is not just your brand. Here, there are no logos, just images of cupcakes. And from the images, you could see the difference in terms of quality and in terms of quality by visuals, technically. So then, if you see this is automatically sending a different message altogether. When you look at the certain, the darkness, this is sending a message of, oh, possibly maybe masculine, for most people, they might consider this masculine, but this is basically sending an idea of, okay, this is luxury, this is a different world altogether. This is one of the rarest kind of cupcakes you can ever have. And in reality, this might just be a regular cupcake. And this is what branding can actually do. And it's important to understand that how you represent a brand, the impression you create either on a website or in an actual store experience or in an actual communication over any platform you have, the impression you leave on the customers is actually important. And that impression is basically what your branding is. So like I've said, a brand must be built on truth. And it's important this is noted. A brand must be built on truth. And an example I want to give, I don't want to mention the company, but this company had to pay fines in the billions. And that's because at a point, it's an oil servicing company, and most persons are familiar with this story. They rebranded and they started selling, the idea of we're going green, and it was beginning to give them good influence with governments. It was creating opportunities for them. They were able to penetrate markets in which they were not initially able to penetrate. It gave them a lot of grounds. But the truth is, as opposed to the messaging of they are going green, and they actually were carrying out some of the most horrific drilling experiences when compared to other oil servicing companies. They were actually more, if I use the word, brutal in terms of their own actual operations. And eventually it backfired because they were saying something else and they were doing something else. And when when the push came to shore, I think the CEO had to resign, board had to even fire him, and eventually they had to pay fines in the billions and billions of dollars. And that's the case of not living in branch, saying something else while doing something else. So, and that's why I've used the boomerang to represent this concept of what goes around comes around. So it's important to understand that you're supposed to leave your brand truth, not just stating stuff and making yourself look, but you have to leave your brand truth, and a brand has to be built on truth. Then also a brand has to be unique. You can see the umbrella clearly here in this image, different from the crowd. And this is what a brand is supposed to be, either by hearing a sound, by seeing an element, by looking at a building, whatever it is, a communication star, I should be able to hear a jingle on the radio, and I just know that, oh, it's associated with this particular brand. For Netflix, you realize once you hear that beat, wherever you find yourself, that's Netflix. You don't need to be told about it. Back then, when we used to watch NTA a lot, when it's Newsline, and wherever you are, you hear that unique tone. You understand that, oh, this is the 9 o'clock news. And that's what strong branding is. And a brand has to be unique to that extent where when you see certain things, you just understand that this is what the brand is about. So this is just, I will start small from this to create my explanation. This is a simple example of what we encounter every day. If you walk into a store and you see this and you're looking for a soda, you're likely to pick what you identify. And a lot of times, there are a few people who want to just explore. Sometimes I'm like that, where I don't want to go for what I'm usually used to, then I want to explore new products. But most often, if you're to find yourself in a shop where you're faced with this scene in a shop, it's easy for you to just unconsciously, if you're looking for a soda, unconsciously you're grabbing, before you're thinking about it, you're grabbing one of the brands you're already familiar with. And that's because you could easily identify them either by colors or by certain elements, design elements that are already represented by them. And you have this where I'm saying, if you're Nigerian, I don't need to say much. By showing this image, a lot of people just understand that, oh, this represents a bank. I shouldn't have even said a bank, but I mean, if you're Nigerian, seeing this image, you already understand what it means. I don't need to say much about it. And that's how effective, a level of communication is. They may not be the best bank in terms of their operations, but I back with them. but it just shows you how unique and how strong the bank is because the colors they've chosen to use to represent their brand, first of all, is something unusual for the banking industry. Even at a global level, for most of the banks I've seen, I'm yet to see a bank that actually has a color of this sort. And whatever the inspiration was, I don't really know. But I think it's actually strong. It speaks volume. Then now I'm giving actual examples. I'm giving more or less like made up examples, but there is an actual situation where a company has actually leveraged on their uniqueness in marketing. And it was crazy because the first time I encountered that ad, and I will just show you a sample. This is it. This is from a particular company. I think this ad was run by a British ad executive. The copywriter is one of the copywriting legends, and this was done in the 80s. Now, the first time I saw this, it was in a class setting where the person had to ask, if we could identify this product. And virtually nobody in that particular setting was able to identify this there. And he shook his head and then he zoomed in to the image. And then you realize that the copy that was very small, like as opposed to the entire image, you see like this copy here is actually not very visible. And what they wrote on this is, if you don't recognize it, you're probably not ready for it. And this was an actual ad, no labels, nothing, just a bottle. And this was done by Futuresoft. So basically, they are telling you, if you can't identify this bottle, don't worry. You're not ready to operate at that level of class. You're probably not ready. And that's to tell you, they are basically leveraging strictly their brand because you start asking yourself, what kind of organization wants to actually market a product and they take the label off, they take everything else off, and they just only show you the bottle and the color of the content of the bottle, and that's it. And they are not even saying, come and buy. They're not telling you, put your money here. They're not telling you, offer you the best luxury. You see how simple and how bland you can say this design is. And yet this was a very powerful campaign because then it makes you understand that, they operate, in a targeted market. They understand their uniqueness. They understand that we have people we are marketing to. We have an audience. We have people who've built that impression. That's when a brand can actually have the audacity to do this kind of stuff, and they call it a marketing campaign. Because if you try it in most brands, most brand products that are out there, if you try it, it's going to eventually be a flop. But this is actually one of the success in terms of ad campaigns, that we could see from the 80s or so. It's actually a very recognized campaign, and it's why I actually brought it as an example. This is strictly a company leveraging on the effectiveness and on the uniqueness of the brand, both in terms of the look, the target audience to create a marketing, and they are just swinging it in a way that is so audacious and crazy. And that's just to make you understand the impact and the power of the brand being unique. So then also, like I would say, a brand is also important to your business. It impacts your business directly. And I've given some examples. I've talked about the Chivas Regal and how unique they are able to use the brand. But one of the stories I actually want to tell about this is, like I said here, in a world faced with chaos, only the strong brands survive. Now, when I was at the academy, the brand, taking my courses on branding, training as a brand strategist, we were told then that this statement was actually made, and this was way before COVID-19. And then, we were starting up, we were like, we're skeptical because it was more or less like, does it really matter? Like, if you really push your marketing, if you do your marketing, we're giving examples of some of the products that, especially here in Nigeria, like, they basically they do mostly generic thing. They basically cannot be differentiated from their competitors, but they sell. So we are making that analysis there. And our instructor then, all he could do was fold his hand and look at us and just laugh. And he told us we should note this. And it seemed like he was a prophet who was prophesying. When COVID-19 came, there was a point where shelves were beginning to be cleared out. And for the first time, when I experienced it, and even with the scare at that particular period, I couldn't help but smile because I walked into one of the malls where I normally get stuff. one of those days, within the time where people were trying to stock up with food and shelves were getting empty in shops. And I realized that, some of the sections where I got my snacks and I bought specific products from, when I got there, they were empty. Now, they were empty with the products in which I would normally go for. And then you realize that there were actually other products. Let's say, for instance, I love chocolate bars a lot, and I love cookies a lot as well. And then I realized that the brands I would go for these were no longer on the shelf. I was seeing stuff I wasn't familiar with. Like I was seeing cookies that I've never seen ever since I walked into that I shop from that mall. I never observed. I was seeing chocolate bars that I never observed. And then I started asking myself, what really happened? But the truth is, like I said, in the world of chaos, only the strong brands survive. Those were cleared out first because those are what people would recognize easily. So it was just a no-brainer. It was just an easy marketing. It was just fluid and easy for those to be cleared off the shelf. And besides the situation of COVID, because we might say, I mean, a pandemic, we might experience that, and I hope so too, just once in our lifetime. But this gives an insight to what really happens on a daily basis because I realized that the product that has actually been in this particular mall, and I've never bothered about this product, getting to, get some of them because I had no choice. They were pretty very good. But even after that, when the shelves came back to normal, when they restart, I just go back to the normal stuff I used. I forgot about those products because they were nice. But the truth is, I don't remember anything about them because there's no impression. There's nothing. I don't know anything about them. There's just nothing. They're just were alternatives at that particular time. And this is what's important as well when it comes to investing in your branding. The concept and the idea of branding is to give an impression and to stay at the top of the user's mind or your customers, your consumers, to stay at the top of their mind. So that whenever they think along that particular line, whenever they think along the particular line of your product or services, you come to mind first before any other product or services comes to mind. And that's what the power of branding does. Marketing alone will not do that because there are companies in Nigeria that they market a lot. I don't want to actually call their names, but they market a lot. Precisely there's a soda brand. They market a lot, but there was a time when we were carrying out a research, a group of persons were carrying out a research, and I found out that a certain class of people will tell you they will never associate themselves with that particular product. And the truth is, the product is actually nice. It's okay. There's nothing bad with it. But the truth is, the impression of this does not have any form of value. This does not have any form of value. It's not in our own state of class. It's not premium enough for us. That was the impression most persons have. And they don't have that impression because of any other thing. They have that impression because of poor branding. Because this product is very well marketed in Nigeria. But the truth is, like I said, they don't have anything that represents them accurately. I've actually had their products and it's nice. But the truth is that's where it ends because in the minds of most people, they're not premium enough. And that's why people don't buy them. So the truth is, just imagine how much market they will be losing just because of they failed to invest in their brand. And I was opportunity to be in a situation where a particular account manager in an agency was saying they've approached this organization and they've told them, see, this is what you need to do and this is why you need to do it. And this organization refused. They felt like, no, our traditional marketing works for us. But then you could really imagine how much market, how much customers they are losing, how much money they could be making if they invested more in branding because a lot of people who are currently not purchasing them, they are not doing so because they've actually encountered it. They are doing so because they are staying away from that product because they feel like it's not premium enough for us. And basically, they don't have any proof for this. That's just because this company has not left that impression that, see, we are premium. We can operate at this level. We can compete with Coca-Cola. We can compete with Pepsi. They've decided to play in a role where people feel like, no, this particular brand should be associated with certain kind of people and it's not premium enough for us. And that's a huge market they are losing because if they eventually, work on their impression, work on that level of communication enough, then they will actually have new users coming to the market. So that's an important aspect as well. You need to understand when it comes to branding your business as well. So yeah, so let's look at some confusion. So the term branding and brand identity are always used, interchangeably. So and it's simple. A brand, like I've said initially, is the customer's perception about a product or service. Basically, the impression you as a business should give them. That's basically your brand. Branding is the process of building that perception. Whether it's a visual identity, storytelling, it's your messaging, your packaging, whatever it is, it's the process of building that perception in the customer's mind. If it's creating better experiences, it's the process of building that perception. So that's what branding is. Brand identity is the visual aspect of that perception, or you've created this feeling of warmth, you've created this feeling of life, you've created this feeling of hope, on a particular on your target audience. So what can they see and relate to that hope? Are there copies they can see? Are there ads they can see? Are there specific imageries they can see that actually ties the perception in which they have about your brand? So that's the brand identity, is the visual aspect. I would say it goes just beyond what we can also see, things we can hear as well. When it comes to sound, like I mentioned Netflix initially, whenever we hear that buzz, wherever you are, you just go, yep, that's Netflix. And that gives you an idea of what, is basically. So in terms of using this thing, so you just understand that branding is a process, brand identity is the visual aspect, and then the brand itself is the perception or the image the company itself projects out to its users. So then let's look at the brand in details. Well, we've talked about the brand identity as being the tip of the iceberg. So now let's look at the iceberg in general. So basically, when you're talking about branding and you're analyzing branding, branding, first of all, is dependent primarily on research. So I think I need to point this out. You cannot have a brand without proper research. Some of the companies we've seen over the years, where they've actually had some of the best brand experience, they have most consistent branding. Such companies, when you look at them, when you look at their history on how they innovate on products, you realize that they invest so much in research. I've seen a document from Nike, how they were able to create the Nike Run. Not just the Nike Run, they had this other product they launched at some point where it improved the experience of users. They observed certain users running, and those users ran with it, and they did some research around it, and they created Nike shoes that would enable them, have that same experience of running with feet, because the people, for some reason, they had some reasons associated with that, and they created an experience around that. We've seen Nike as well partner with Apple in creating the Nike Run. And then when you see all of this, it's solely based on research. They don't just think of these ideas, then they push it to the market. So it's important to understand that whether you're developing a brand or you're innovating on an already existing brand, it's solely based on research, primarily research. So now with that out of the way, the impact of your research is then going to boil down into your strategy and your design. And now a lot of times when people talk about design, people always feel design is always about graphics. No. When you're talking about design, yes, your color is there, but choosing a brand name, choosing a strap line, that's your tagline, your storytelling, and also the kind of visuals you use. All these are part of designs, There are also tones, and there are a lot more you can actually put on that phase of design. Then when it comes to the aspect of the strategy, whatever you've gotten from your research actually forms what you build on the strategy session, which is your mission statements and your vision statements, the values, your positioning statements, the brand archetype, messaging pillars, the voice, the brand's purpose. You see, and then when you're tying all of this together, the second half of the iceberg actually determines the top half of the iceberg, because you can't have a vision. You can't just come out and say, let's use a color, let's use it, just pick a name, let's have a logo, let's just have a strap line, let's tell one story, let's use this particular image. And then you're just going to have your brand all over the place because you're going to shoot a miss. But when you have your missions, you have your values, you have your positions, you have your messaging pillars, you define your archetype, you understand your voice, and at the core of all of this, you understand the brand purpose. So it starts to align. You start knowing the kind of stories you tell. You start understanding the kind of imagery that will communicate this very well. From here, you understand the strapline that best captures your values, your mission statement, and your positioning. You understand the stories, the storytelling you use for the brand that will actually sink in more into the hearts of the users. You understand the logo that will best represent you. And then you understand the name that captures the essence of your brand. Now, there's no straight approach in doing this. There are different ways in which you can do this in terms of, so I'm not saying if, let's say, for instance, you believe in go-getting, then you have to look for an icon that suggests go-getting. No. Sometimes you might believe in go-getting, but your icon might be derived from something not directly from go-getting, but that aligns perfectly with go-getting. So if you're talking about go-getting, you're basically talking about resilience. You're basically talking about tenacity. You could actually pick an icon that people already recognize that is associated with strength, that is associated with tenacity. You can look at the industry and you understand that, oh, this particular brand, they've used icons that are like this, and this is what they're associated with. So if we use this similar icon, it may not mean anything in terms of an actual symbolic representation, but the truth is it has associations around it. So you can decide to use that icon, understanding that you're going to spark the same feeling or the same emotions, because this is already associated with similar industries. So it's important you understand, like, this is how it works as well. So like I said, there are different ways in which you actually sit down to go through the process of building a brand. You can actually create, all this. So, but then I'm going to be walking you just primarily through the stages, and then we are going to be looking at a case study with some highlights which we picked out within a particular organization. So the brand building process primarily involves brand research, brainstorming, design and implementation, and brand management. So let's start with the brand research, but this is the company we're going to be using as a case study, UPDC. So sometime last year, UPDC approached our organization to help recreate, to help rebrand them, and they were going through a transition phase where they were also going through an acquisition phase and also trying to come anew in the minds of the target audience. So, and they were acquired by Custodian. And before the acquisition of Custodian, UPDC as an independent entity was also looking at repositioning itself and rebranding itself in total. So, and you can see UPDC, it used to be a subsidiary of USCN, the USC, group we are familiar with in Nigeria, and eventually it became an independent company of its own as well. So, and then I'm going to be giving you some of the highlights. I won't be diving into everything, but I'll give some specifics in which we had to deal with when it comes to rebranding UPDC to get the story and the message which we're trying to sort out today very well. So now, first of all, the brand research is it starts first of all with the self-search. As an organization, you don't just say you want to brand. You have to understand first of all what your first motive for starting a business is and what problem you're trying to solve. So now let me keep UPDC aside for a bit because I already have the details here. But let me just create a scenario. So let's say, but I'll still do something around real estate. Let's say you want to create a real estate company. You want to start up a real estate company, a real estate brand. And then your motivation is basically you're passionate about building homes, you're passionate about architecture, you're passionate about real estate in general, you just love the structures. But then you realize that the problem you're really trying to solve is one of building communities. We have a situation in Lagos where people invest a lot in luxury, they're investing a lot in building properties, and sometimes they are not really bothered about building communities where people can actually live. And let's say that's the problem you're trying to solve. So you understand that why you're going to get into this business is your passion for architecture, your passion for design, your passion for real estate. But then again, you understand you don't just want to do real estate, you want to build communities where people can actually live in. Then now you understand, first of all, when you've defined your motivation and the problem you're trying to solve, you have to understand that industry. You have to know what success, basically this session highlights just primarily two things or three things. One, you have to understand what the industry is like in terms of the success. You have to understand the gap where your competitive analysis comes in, and you understand where you fit. You have to understand the gap. You have to understand that area where you come in as a business, where you come in as a brand, where you actually fit in, where your solution actually fits in. Then you have to define your audience. You have to understand their journey, defining your audience, mapping out the user journey. I can't get into these details. Doing the competitive analysis, I can't get into that in details. But primarily, you have to understand all this. You have to understand the gap. So using the scenario I'm creating, if you want to create communities, first of all, you have to understand what are the successful real estate companies in Nigeria. What are they like? So when you look at these real estate companies and you understand what they are like, you understand what success is. You know, first of all, okay, this is what it means to be successful as a real estate organization, as a real estate company. And then you have to do a competitive analysis to understand, not just so that you see what you have to do different. We have to understand, like I said, understand what success looks like. You have to understand what has made these people succeed over the years. What are their culture? What are their leadership structures? What is that unique thing, in their marketing style that differentiates them from other people? And then you have to look at this as well to see if it's something you can mimic that works for you, or if it's something you can actually use, on the opposite that also works for you. So you have to understand that. And then, like I said, you're trying to build a community. If, for instance, the community you're trying to build is solving a problem where, let's say we have GD, GD hangs out with his friends. Let's use my name on the other hand, David, and David and GD, they have kids, they have families, but maybe GD stays in Ibejuleki, and then David stays somewhere in Kenya, and they only get to see each other at the office, Mondays to Fridays in Victoria Island. And in reality, they often want a situation where their families will meet up, their kids will hang out, but that rarely happens. And that's because of the distance. And by the time it gets to the weekend, they're occupied with a lot, and they just want to get themselves ready for the next day. And you realize that you want to create a community where, somebody like GT and somebody like David can actually have that dream home they're looking for, where their kids can actually play and relate. Where even if they see each other at work or when they want their families to hang out, they can really have that access. Now you understand that the problem you're really trying to solve here is you're trying to, like you said, I said initially, you're building a community. Now, in building a community, you might want a situation where people want a community that gets them away from their regular life. They don't want to be associated with anything, whether they have a work friend or not. See, you have you as a work friend, but see, this is when I want to get away into this goal. I want to meet a new family. It's more or less like a vacation experience for me. I want to meet a new family, or I want to be around my own siblings or my own relatives. You see, and you understand that when you do your market analysis, you start to realize that there are people who actually want such experiences, and then you can build an estate or a company for them that helps them have that experience. When you understand that this is something you can do, and also you have to also show that there's a gap. Like I said, understand where you fit it. You have to be sure there's a market gap to fill in. So, but then if you understand that this is actually something people need, that starts becoming your selling point, where you start to, that's where you move to the brainstorming session. So you now look at what makes you unique. If you're building a community that links people, where, we see ourselves at work a lot, but at the end of the day, we want our families to hang out. I want my kids to meet the kids. They can play soccer together and so on and so forth. Then you understand that you're linking people just beyond work. You're building family, you're building friends. But if you say you're building a community as well, you're building that kind of community that people want to just get away from the urban lifestyle. So you also understand that what you're building for people is a getaway. So you see, one is talking about link, the other one is talking about getting away. And both are building communities, and they're all in real estate. But you see, the differentiation comes as you start to define more. We're both in real estate, we're trying to build communities, but me, I'm trying to link people within urban cities together. I'm trying to build that real estate experience where they can, meet with people more often rather than being dispersed by location. And even if they're in the same location, the structures are not created to give them that experience of a community. But that's what you're trying, that's the problem you're trying to solve, and that's your uniqueness. And then there's someone who is saying, no, I'm solving the problem of getting away, moving away from the urban lifestyle, moving away from what you're familiar with. You see, this starts to form the basis for your messaging. It starts to form the basis for the company or the organization. So you start to understand that what you're really selling is linking people or getting people away, irrespective of the fact that you're going to be building houses. This becomes the core of what you're selling. This becomes the impression you want to leave on the customers which you're going to be dealing with. So, and that's where you come in. You have to define your archetype. So if you're linking people, if you're also maybe getting people away, so what kind of brand are you? You know, so are you like a news brand? Oh, you want people to get away, you want them to have that garden experience, you want them to be in that situation where they can just sit by the lakeside and just get fresh air and discuss and just, kayak and fish casually. You see, then you understand that, oh, I'm a news brand. Then you have to define your brand voice, your brand tone. You have to set your positioning statement. That's stuff that makes you unique. Or you're linking people. This is what you do. You have to express it more in details, and you have to state it down expressly. This is what we're out to do. We're here to give people this experience, so and so and so and so. We want to do this, we want to do that, and which I'll show you specifically on that briefly on UPDC. So you have to expressly state that, and when you state your position, you understand this is how I want people to feel. This is how I want people to see me. Then you have to set your vision and your mission statements clearly, and it has to be along that line as well. And then you have to define your messaging pillars, because in building your personalities, you've defined your archetypes, you have brand voice, you set your positioning statement, you know what you want them to feel, you set your vision and mission statements. Then the next thing is, what do you tell them? You know, if you're going to put out an ad, what are you going to say on the ad? If you're going to talk to them, what are you going to be talking to them about? You're not just going to be telling them to buy a property, because everybody does that. But what differentiates you? So you start to look at your messaging pillars, which from the scenario I've created, getting away or linking people becomes key. So what are the other key things around linking people or getting away? You start to look at things that has to do with family values. You have to start looking about stuff that has to do with community development, community growth, unity and coming together of people, the importance of that. And that's from where you start building a brand story as well. So then I will go back now to UPDC. So like after an in-depth research of the Nigerian real estate industry and brainstorming sessions. Now, after we had our conversation with UPDC, this is what we came up with, but this is not all. There's a little bit more, but I can't list everything here. Both for NDA purposes and precisely also because it might be too much. But I decided to list two key aspects of it that I can actually put out in a session like this. Now, they wanted a position as real estate brand that stays with you even after you sell a home. Now, understand that they didn't just come up rightly to tell us, oh, they wanted to do this. Of course, there are lots of questions you have to ask. There are a lot of analysis you have to do. What you're seeing here that I've stripped out into just two summaries was actually the process of getting to this point was from a proposal, was from two strategy documents, a proposal document and a seminar document. But we realized that they wanted a position as a real estate brand that stays with you even after selling you a home. So basically, a lifestyle brand, they are there all through life cycle, as a homeowner. Then they also want to sell out self and audience that wanted to buy their dream home without breaking the bank. Now, these are two aspects which I will show you how they reflect in other aspects of the communication of UPDC as a brand. Now, first of all, so some of the messaging pillars, if you want to be positioned as a brand that stays with you all through the life cycle of you purchasing a property, first of all, UPDC has to position itself as we have the capacity. So we're a foremost real estate group in Nigeria. They have to sell their leadership, how dynamic their leadership is, how excellent their leadership is, and not just how excellent their leadership is, how excellent their services are. They have to talk about lifestyle in terms of their communication, and then they have to talk about partnerships as well. Now, and these are some of the things that are key because, for instance, when you talk about real estate, UPDC has a foremost real estate group. If you search for a real estate company and you see, if you search for real estate companies and then you see an event that has to do real estate, and then you see one very good looking guy in a suit and his name is written and beneath it you see the CEO of UPDC, and he's standing with a popular figure in another industry. Now you might knock it up while you're searching for real estate. You see that particular guy again in another event. Then you start to ask yourself, what's it about this company? But now, this is also strategic because this CEO is not attending these events just because he wants to show himself. No, it's strategic to the brand because, first of all, him to be in certain platforms, it's because of his expertise in that particular industry, and which this eventually translates to users to understand that if you can see these people in this platform, means they understand what they're doing, and it's strategic to position them to position themselves as an organization, as thought leaders. Not just in terms of their financial capabilities, but in terms of how well they understand the market. So you can hear them in seminars, and they participate actively in this. The executives participate actively in this, and this is also strategic, also in pushing out their message. When you look at the communication, they try to sell excellence as much as they can. They try to sell communications or stuff that revolves around people and lifestyle. And then they talk about the partnership aspect as well, which you're going to see some of this reflect in their vision statement and in their mission statement. Like you could see from the first line where it says to build and manage distinctive lifestyle developments delivered to time, cost, and quality. Now look at lifestyle development delivered to time, cost, and quality. It ties into this again. You want to be positioned as a real estate brand that stays with you, a lifestyle brand. You also set out to serve an audience that want to buy their dream home without breaking the bank. So if you come down here, the first line in their mission statement says that basically in a different way. The second line also says it in terms of to build customers for life by providing highest level of service throughout the property life cycle. They talk about to build shareholder value through innovation, excellence, and attractive risk-adjusted returns. We talk about partnership. See? So then again, you still look at the vision statement to become the leading real estate and facility management company of choice. Now, the reason why the word of choice is important is they are trying to position themselves at that point. They see, we want you to see us as this company that we stay with you all through the life cycle. So they're not just taking real estate alone. They are talking about facility management in their vision. And they are talking about of choice because they are trying to let you understand. So we want to be in that place where people will decide to come to us. Because we're not selling buildings, we are selling a perception about people having their dream homes without having to break the bank. We want to partner with you. We want to stay with you in the whole life cycle of you purchasing a house, and to the point where whatever it is, your life comes to an end, we want to be there with you. And that's where, it's still also reflected in their vision. And they say by delivering world-class properties and services tailored to the needs of the Nigerian market. Well, now that's because they're primarily operating in the Nigerian market, but you see tailored to the needs, which still talks about the people. It goes back to one of their messaging pillars, people, partnership. It's tailored to the people, you see, whilst providing sustainable value to all our stakeholders and shareholders. Sustainable values to stakeholders and shareholders. If you're buying a property, you're basically a stakeholder and the company, because if you're owning properties, in the millions, that means you're a major part of that company, and they are still telling you are going to be providing sustainable value. So imagine we've not actually gone through this process. How can we craft specific messaging that actually sends consistent message to the audience in which they are looking at? Because you can't have a situation where you have a different mission statement, you have a different vision statement, and it doesn't tie into anything. And it was able to tie into certain things because we already have certain messaging pillars already defined, and those messaging pillars were actually built from the positioning in which we've set for them, in which this is how they want to be seen. And from how they want to be seen, we've actually set out some stuff in which you can extract information from to constantly communicate to their target audience, and we can see clearly reflect in their vision and in their vision. And then now when you talk about the aspect of design implementation, now this is where it starts to get interesting. So this is where a lot of people usually get carried away. This is where you start to design your logo. This is where you define your colors, your fonts, patterns, icons, image style, and so on. This is where you dive into your storytelling. This is where you create your brand tagline, and you create copy samples as well. And I know one of the taglines that is really associated with UPDC, it's not primarily like always there, but a lot of the materials we've created for them, you always see building for Nigerians and by Nigerians. Now you understand that the concept of building for Nigerians and by Nigerians, they are really trying to tell you basically we're building for you. There are people you can trust. We're Nigerians like you. We're not coming from any other place. There are people that were here. We understand your struggle. We understand what you're going through. We understand the financial situation, and we're building for you. We can partner with you. We're here to stay with you all through. It's still tying into the idea in which you initially created. So when you're talking about your storytelling as well, you still tie into your positioning and your messaging pillars. The strapline has to tie into that. You're creating copy samples, like maybe as a pitch or at the initial level, and both general that will form the foundation of your communications in total. It has to tie into this as well. So then now I want to explain briefly on the logo. Now this is the logo, and this is the logo eventually created for them. It was simple. Now, if this company is coming out, they're telling you want to create a company that stays with you, through the life cycle of your property ownership, it means you have to be a company you can trust, in which amongst the target users of UPDC, in which most of them currently now, people who knew UPDC at the initial stage would be maybe in their 40s, their maybe mid-late 40s to early 50s and beyond. This UPDC logo is something they're already familiar with. It's an icon they've trust, and when we carried out research, found out. And then with the acquisition of Custodian is a major key player in the industry when it comes to financial security. Now, tying both together, you understand that it's just the idea of trust, making people understand that, see, UPDC is not being sold out to a company that you don't know. UPDC is still connected to a company that is strong and you can rely on. So if they're telling you want to do this, they are not just saying you want to do it. You can really see clearly that, see, they're associated with this one, they are bold enough to add their icon to their logo to saying that, see, we are one and together, which actually sends a stronger message to say, oh, these people we've always known, UPDC was coming from UAC, which is a major company in Nigeria, and now they are affiliated to, they've been acquired by Custodian, which is also a major key player when it comes to financial security. So that also sends a strong message when it comes to the mind of the user, you know. And on average, one person might not just develop a new identity. You could develop a new identity, but then by the time you start building the trust, you have a lot of time gone by, you have a lot more to invest. But if you're already creating based on a trust, you have the equity, the both brands have, then you're going to build a stronger force, and which is what inspired the process of the identity for the UPDC brand. And then in terms of the color, well, this has more to do with business because it was an acquisition, and then you have difference in terms of color palette. Well, we actually did an analysis where we understand that, like when you see the case of Access Bank and Diamond Bank, you realize that after the acquisition by Access Bank, Diamond Bank basically, some elements of Diamond Bank still came in. But in terms of design, of course, you know, we have to make those analyses and to see. And the original color of UPDC's logo not blending perfectly very well with the color of Custodian. So we decided to adopt that of Custodian primarily, since it was basically a decision. We decided to adopt that, but you know, that decision, it was made at different phases. You know, we had to pitch, of course, you know, to the executives for them to understand the key aspect of this, why it's important for this to be done as well. So, but then we implemented primarily the colors from Custodian, and then reflected it as well in most part of the brand. So talking about being with you and all through your life cycle and seeing how they can actually manage, help you get your dream home without you breaking the bank. You can see the first copy sample says, get the best, you know, return on your investments. You know, they're not telling you come and buy a house, get the best return on your investments. And there are posts what we've created for UPDC that basically just educates you on real estate. Some just talks about the importance of investments. Right? And then you have this one to the right hand where it says talk to us. Sometimes some of the things, you know, some of the marketing strategy, digital marketing strategy we created for UPDC. So that's what I say. I said initially that the brand has to be built on the truth. Now, sometimes you have the executives, you know, they go online and what we're saying is, see, just talk to us about your real estate problems and we'll talk to you, we'll reply you. And some people send messages and the executives actually make analysis of these messages and they reply and they respond. They're not talking about properties that has to do with UPDC. If you have a real estate concern, just talk to us and we'll give you a response. Now, you understand that if you come to me for an advice about buying a car, you know, and I'm not telling you to sell a car. I'm not telling you I want to sell a car to you, but I'm just advising you on the best cars. And meanwhile, you have a different company that is telling you sell a car, I want to sell a car to you, want to sell a car to you. If I've given you the breakdown of the car industry, how cars operate, why this is the best for your income, and I'm showing you different financial plans that are available, you know, challenges that you can face when owning a particular car, it's easier for you to trust me and buy a car for me, rather than just patronizing somebody who is saying buy a car, buy a car, buy a car. And now this is one area we also, you know, have to play on very well, because if they are saying they are going to stay with you, that means they should be able to provide, even in some very minimal and simple ways, consultancy services as well. So, and this wouldn't have come up if we've not first of all understood that, see, this is where these people are willing to play. You know, then secondly, again, why I still talk about building your brand on the truth. Now, they're not just saying it. So when it's time for we to actually, okay, do this, see, you have to be online, no matter how busy their schedules are. Realize that these executives, these are top level directors, they have meetings here and they still create out that time. That's to make you understand that they really want to live this brand truth. They really want you to understand that we're in business. We're not just saying this thing. This is what we want. And when people gain this impression, when people come here and they talk about, they have interactions, it's an exciting experience for them. And that's the impression we give it. So even if they may not be looking at purchasing any stock in that minute, the fact that a company is just talking to me about properties in general, it goes a long way in the minds of the user. And it maintains that impression that, see, these people, they are one of the people I should maybe look into when I want to get something done eventually. And we talk about, like when you see on the video, I say, let's help you look after your property. So the truth is, you bought the property. A lot of companies, when you purchase units from them, basically start out. You start looking for people to help you fix things. You start sorting things out, but they don't want that. They want a situation where they have these service opportunities where if you're coming down to the point where you have to fix certain things that are damaged eventually while using your property, they're still there for you. You want an upgrade in certain things on your properties, they're still there for you. They're basically not just selling your house and abandoning you. They are there to help you maintain you, offer you different service to ensure you have that experience. And that's to tell you, like, you have to also represent that in terms of their communication as well, for you to for the users to also understand that we're not just saying this, but it's serious. And when you also ask questions and you reach out, and there'll be responses as well. And all this was built based on the fact that we first of all understand the place these people want to play in the mind of the users. And they are also willing to give the truth. They don't just want to play that role, they don't just want to set that impression, they're also willing to give the truth, like I've stated as well. That they give out time to answer questions. It doesn't matter if one is willing to purchase a property, but as long as you are there at that particular time where you can meet them and you can ask a question about properties, they're going to give you an answer. And I mean, it's amazing. It all comes down to an experience that was built based on a knowledge of understanding and crafting out where they want to be, where they want to play in the mind of the user, the impression they want to leave. So then, after you've created your copy samples, you design your logos, you map out the touch points, all possible contacts you have with the user, and you design for them. So I've given an instance of the social media experience we've created over time for you to see. Some of other experiences you can see. Normally, yes, you want to send out a letter, it has to carry your brand name. You want to go on social media, it has to carry your brand name. You have to design brochures, you need to have a website right now. These are not things you can actually deal with. There are a lot more collateral we did for them, but these are just a few represented here. So then some of the simple, or let me say the different phases of design you can classify in terms of the brand collateral, which can go from as simple as creating a simple business card to branding an entire hall for an activation event, design some cars and so on and so forth, t-shirts, it's endless, shirts, ties, cufflinks, shoes, some brands they go all the way, they design a lot much more. And in terms of creating the brand collateral, that's depending on how, to the extent in which the business, wants to go. However you want to go, however you want to push the scope of the design. People do phone patches, like it's endless. I know for them, we did even some screensavers, go for mobile and desktop. We did a lot, but these are just few listed there. But when you talk about your channels, you have to brand the channels. Your messaging has to be on your website. This has to be on your website. Your colors have to be reflected. You need to brand for blogs. You need to create a blog channel if you don't have one. You need to brand for social media. There has to be consistency in your look and feel. When people are communicating, when people are navigating around you, if I see your business card and I see your website, I should be able to see the relationship. And you can see from the design, when you look at the 4 elements, that you just see the relationships without difficulty. And then when you're talking about channels as well, it's not just restricted to a website, blog, or social media. The reason why these were listed is like the age where we are right now. These are slowly taking over, or let me know once they are fast taking over. Some people still invest in traditional marketing, TV and radio, but most companies right now are beginning to invest the majority of their budget when it comes to digital marketing and promoting digitally in general. Then also, you can also create experiences for activations, special offers and so on. Experiences sometimes are usually not, you don't have to break the banks to create experiences. And I'm going to show you an example shortly, an experience we created for UPDC. So yeah, so these are some of the areas that we have to look up, like I said, you map out the touch points, understand the different places where clients or your users are going to get in touch or in contact with you, and then you design for those aspects. So yeah, these are just showing the design collaterals we had for them, you know, then for brand channels, websites, social media, newsletters, so branded and sending more messages about their values, their updates, their news. It's just a channel to re-emphasize a brand. And then we talk about design of experience. So what I was saying on design experience, you don't have to break it back. A lot of times when people talk about experiences, they often overthink it. But now this is a very simple, more or less like an augmented reality created for one of the facilities. So where rather than you having to come and see the facilities from their website, you can actually take a virtual tour of the facility and see what it's like and understand, like you could see, where it has numbers, giving you measurements of distance. And this is just one view. If you visit the UPDC website, you could actually see more views about this. And it gives, more or less like a real-time feeling where you don't really need to come and inspect this place yourself. You can be in the United States and you just have a view and have an idea of what this property is like. And then if you like what you see, understanding the location where you see, like, there is Victoria Island, you can easily make a purchase. And you have other images that shows other aspects as well of the scenery of the environment. So this is not a traditional marketing like we used to know. This is also simple experience. Some other experiences which we've done for clients, is also embedding chatbots, where sometimes you may not be able to have some of the questions you want to ask attended to by a person, because you might be asking that question by 12 midnight and that person will be fasting for the next business day. But you could have a chatbot that will eventually have some level of communication with you, and chatbots are artificial intelligence that have actually been designed to cater for most of the frequently asked questions by customers or users. So, and you can actually have conversations with these bots where it almost feels like you're having a conversation with a real human. And then when you have conversations to an extent, you can be redirected to an actual, customer service person or a contact person you can communicate with. And that's an experience that when you use effectively, it also leads to transactions that you'll be amazed. And these are simple things that can be implemented without you breaking the bank. You don't need to have 200 million naira in your account to create experiences of sort. So it's important this is noted as well. You can create simple experiences, and then as well, this will eventually count in terms of the impression of the users. So then the last part of the brand building process is the brand management. Now, you have to understand that your brand does not stop after you've created it. That's when it's just started. So it's important to have a designated brand manager, and then it's important to have an agency. Now, why am I saying this? If you create all this, you can't effectively manage them eventually, because we update, for instance, the UPDC website, we make updates on it. Your brochures, we make updates. And sometimes, we make adjustments based on the trends in the industry, which I will talk about that eventually. So you need people who are specialized in this area that will help you spot, opportunities you can tap into. There are some ideas we've actually sold to them in which initially, they may not have thought of, and that is where an agency come in. And it's important to have an internal person in your company that will be in charge of the brand, or in charge of the brand in general, that helps, that understands the process of the company and can help communicate it effectively to the agency. So it's more or less like the manager is an interface between your agency and the management of the company. So that's where I would say the role of a brand manager. And of course, the role of your brand manager can also expand far beyond that. So I'm just trying to make it basically in the bare minimum. But in terms of ensuring that your communications at all level and your experiences at all level, in terms of how you want to go out, there are certain things you want to create. You want to create an activation, you can't handle it internally. You have to contract that. You want to create a campaign online, you can't just manage that internally. You have to outsource that, and it's important to have an agency. Some companies try to do it on their own, but I only know of very few companies that have been successful doing it internally, because it's often not easy, because it takes a whole lot of work, it takes a whole lot of research. So it's important to have that balance. where you have somebody internally that interface with the agencies that can actually manage the core of this communication or branding you're trying to build. So then, when it comes to brand managers, well, you also understand that there are new insights from that you have to adjust. I stated that earlier, and trends and technology change. And then I say in summary, keep best in mind. So what does best mean basically? It means changes in politics, the economy, social changes, technology changes, and environmental changes, legal changes. As at last year, in a major protest in Nigeria, we saw that Twitter was used very much, and it was a huge tool in the protest. And sometime this year, Twitter was banned in Nigeria. And that shows you that's a change in both politics and the social and legal change at the same time. So it just shows you that trends will change. As at 2009, digital marketing wasn't what it is right now. If it was there, it was very minimal. And as of 2009, apart from Amazon, there were just only very few other e-commerce companies. Amazon was like the most popular, and then maybe eBay then, and then over the years, you realize you have more e-commerce companies, and not just having more e-commerce companies, people are now beginning to sell products on social media. You can actually have your own stores on Instagram and on Facebook. And besides this as well, you realize a lot of companies are realizing that rather than working with a third-party service, we can actually sell on our website. And these were not the way it was initially. It's just the changing trends. So you have to understand that times will change. There will be new insights, there will be changes, and then you have to actually readjust and ensure that your brand is constantly optimized so that you don't eventually go out of relevance and you stay constantly at the top of the mind of your users. So yeah, I think this covers it up. So thank you everyone that has been here so far. So if you have questions, this is the time to ask.
Hi, David. Well done. Thank you for taking us through this journey. I have a question, and the question is, when it comes to, so you were talking about management and doing updates on the branding. So what would you say about changing some elements, like just along the line in your business or in brand management, you just want to change some elements? What are the implications of maintaining some things and changing some things entirely?
Okay. When it comes to updating or changing elements in branding, usually there are no complications because you have to be strategic about it. It's when you're not strategic about it, that's when it gets complicated, which is why I talked about having an agency. Now, when we're talking about changes, for instance, early this year, Porsche, they rebranded, they did a total rebrand where they changed their logo. And then they also even redefined, like, they did some addition in terms of their storytelling as well. And they strategically did that at the point where they wanted to launch certain new products as well. And they did an entire review for this particular launch, in which a particular launch for this new branding was YouTube videos over an hour. So they actually had to position several, say, messagings or opportunities for people to anticipate that this was going to come. This was going to be the reason we are going to be transitioning. Okay, now let me use one that was done locally. When Fort Oil wanted to, when Fort Oil was actually sold off and they were acquired by a new company, I think it was sold off by Union Oil. I forgot the company that bought over Fort Oil. So Fort Oil rebranded to Adova. Now you realize that by the time they were about to unveil the new brand, they started seeing it in their communication, where they started, updating the logo. They did a transition, first of all, of the Fort Oil logo into the new logo. Where if I could access that visual, I would have shown it. But it shows a transition from the Fort Oil logo to the Adova logo. You see, they started doing that on social media, and they were communicating it in other places, and they started saying we're evolving. So they didn't just immediately come in and then the transition. So why Fort Oil? I'm using Instagram as one of the channels now, I knew I followed that closely, and I know the agency that did that rebrand. When they were transitioning, we were making it slowly to say, we're transitioning, we are changing, we're moving, and they kept seeding it and they kept sending that message. So basically, it's for people to understand that, see, we are moving into something else, but we're the same company. We're changing how we look, how we feel. We're the same company. They didn't say what oil is going there. They say we're evolving. So that has to do with your messaging. So that's why I said if it is not strategically done, then it's going to fall apart. Or if it's strategic, then it's going to be successful. So usually it does not have any implication unless it's poorly done. So it depends on how effective the team managing that transition or that change or adjustment is. We've seen also, was it this year or late last year? Burger King as well also rebranded, and it was an overhaul. Like it changed colors. It didn't just rebrand in terms of just minor changes. It was a total rebrand, basically an overhaul. You get, and they were effective in terms of how they communicate. So it's how strategic the team managing it is. It's really not about the change. It's how strategic management of the process is. That's what's important. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, it does. Thank you so much.
Is there any other question? The absence of other question, I think we will come to the end of this